It's about 11 o'clock, so I'm going to get this panel started. So in case you didn't know, this is resin casting for cosplay. So here I'm going to kind of give you a basic introduction to resin and how it can be used to enhance your cosplay, because resin can do some pretty cool stuff. You'll also learn safety precautions. Resin is not completely safe, so you have to be careful when using it. And then I'm going to share some techniques that I've learned through casting resin that'll help you to enhance your cosplay. So before we get started, does anyone know what resin is? Yes, in the front.
It is a compound. I don't think it's a polymer, but I know it's a compound that sets within a mold to form hard molded objects.
Okay, so for those of you who couldn't hear, he says a compound that sets within a mold to create solid objects. And that's pretty much the basics of it. Anyone else want to give it a crack? Okay, well that pretty much covered it. So, all right, so you're probably asking, who am I? My name is Mythril-Arts. I'm a cosplay guest here, and I've been cosplaying since about 2011, so I've been experienced with resin since that time. So these are 3 costumes that I have. I love Legend of Zelda, obviously, and each of these costumes that you see here, I've used resin in some capacity. So the Princess Agatha on the far right, a lot of the accessories I did out of resin. Ganondorf, the crown, a large part of that is made out of resin. All those little spikes you see on the head. And then Princess Hilda, I made the crown out of resin. And I think also the belt buckle as well. So I'm going to show you a little video by Smooth On, which is a popular distributor of resin. They're industry standard, and their products are pretty easy to use. So I'm going to show you a video kind of basing to give you a visual of what resin casting is like. See, it's a 2-part compound mostly, and for it, you can distribute how many amounts you need. Mix it together, and that's when the magic starts happening. Perfect copy of whatever you're trying to mold. So I took that from the YouTube channel. There's a lot of good resources on how to cast with their resin. Oops, sorry. Okay, so what is resin exactly? So it basically is a thermoplastic, which means it's activated by heat, that is formed by the combination of what's called a resin, the actual resin itself, and a catalyst, which makes the resin heat up and form into a solid shape. It comes in different hardnesses, measured by what's called the Shore hardness scale, and that measures the resistance to indentation. So it can be either hard as a rock, or it can be a little flexible as well. It just depends on the kind of resin you get. And resin refers to either a polyester resin or a polyurethane resin for these purposes. And polyester resin is also known as epoxy resin, and it's usually a little bit cheaper and easier to find. You can find it in a hardware store, craft store, whatever. The color is usually clear or amber, but you can tint it with different colors to get different effects. And you can get it at Joann, go to get it at Michael's. It's the 2-part environmental resin. You've probably seen that in the store. And in the glue section or the floral section has that as well. Then there's also polyurethane resin, which is a bit more specialty, and it's way more versatile in my opinion. It comes in a clear, translucent, and opaque applications. And this mostly is found in specialty stores like Reynolds, if you have one around here, Hobby Works, Plaza Arts, or most commonly online. That's where I get most of my resin is online. It's just easier that way. What is resin not? And this is important. It's not edible. Do not eat it. Do not let your pets eat it. Do not let your children eat it. Don't let your grandma eat it. Do not eat it. You'll have a bad time. And seriously, it's best if you have small kids or animals around, just when you're casting resin, just kind of lock them away so you can be safe. Because resin can look like candy when, it looks like candy colors. It's not exactly a cheap hobby to get into. The starter costs are a little expensive, but it is cost effective. And I say that because you can make nearly infinite copies of an original. You can sell it, but the startup costs, with the silicone, the mold, all the material you need is a little expensive, but it's an investment. It's not 100% safe, and because resin is you must use proper safety precautions when using resin. I'll get more into it later on. But you have to protect your lungs, you have to protect your skin when using resin, because you only have one skin and you only have one set of lungs, so protect them. And it's very important to do that. And it's not 100% stable. Resin is a fickle mistress. You have a lot of things can affect resin even before and after you've already cured it. Humidity level, the temperature in the room, the type of mold material you use, and how old your resin is, all of that can affect it. So you want to make sure you have the ideal conditions to make sure that your resin comes out as nice as possible. And bubbles, if you all know, bubbles are the enemy of the resin, but I'll talk about techniques to kind of mitigate that. And bubbles can form because, it starts off as a liquid and it solidifies. So any bubbles that are in there are going to get trapped, but I'll talk about that later. And resin is not entirely indestructible. Most resins are pretty fragile, and they will break if you throw it around, mess around with it. So you have to be kind of careful with it, especially the polyurethane resins. So my modus is to have resin be ornamental rather than structural. But you can do structural things with resin, but you just have to make sure you have supports. Like if you're casting a sword, make sure that you put a metal rod inside of it so that it can have strength. And we'll talk about that later as well. So how is resin used for cosplay? And this little star here, I was proud of. I have a Rainbow Road costume that I do, and I put LED lights into there to make it shine. So resin, you use it, mostly you use it to create jewelry pieces and little accessories like gemstones and orbs out of clear resin. You can use opaque resin for jewelry settings, for pendants, for brooches, earrings, bracelet, jewelry pieces, even crowns and tiaras. I made my Princess Zelda costume I had on yesterday. I took that. That was made out of resin. It was a curved piece, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But that was also made out of resin. So you can, your imagination is your limit. And wearable costume pieces, a little bit bigger pieces, you can make a helmet, and you can make props like weapons, swords, knives, kunai, and armor pieces as well. But just remember, it has to be ornamental, be smart about it. And resin can also be used to coat and protect your props. EVA foam is the pop material that everyone uses to make armor pieces. If you want to make it strong, coat it with resin. And it'll create a slightly flexible and strong protection for your armor pieces. So you may ask, what do you need to get started? So you need resin, duh. So a popular brand, like the video I showed you, is Smooth On. And they're actually based in Pennsylvania, in Macungie, Pennsylvania, so you can actually visit their physical store, but they have an online store as well. And then they also have a couple of brick and mortar distributors, like Plaza Arts. I don't know if you all have that up here. You can also get resin from Alumilite, is also a good competitor. Tap Plastics, Brick in the Yard is online. Hobbyworks, Michael's, Joanne, any kind of crafty store, you can probably find resin there. And you can also get whole kits, with the silicone, everything you need, stirring sticks, cups, measuring, to get started with resin. So you also need a mold material. The most popular and easiest to use is silicone, which is also a two-part product. And urethane rubber, you can also use, it's a little bit cheaper than silicone. Silicone is a little expensive. You can use urethane rubber or any other mold material. I've used glycerin before, and glycerin is really cool. It's a little bit complicated to make, but with glycerin, you can actually remelt it. You melt it in the microwave into the shape that you want, use it to cast your resin, and then you can melt it and make another shape out of it. And you can also buy pre-made molds. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot available on Etsy, on eBay, on Amazon even. You can buy pre-made molds to just save your life. You also need a mold release. It's not necessary in all situations, but the mold release is like a protective barrier for your silicone mold to help it release easier when you pour the resin into it. Because resin gets really hot. Again, it's a thermoplastic, so it gets really hot. So to extend the life of your mold, it gets damaged over time. But use mold release. It's a spray that, or you can also use Vaseline or baby powder as well as mold releases. And then for the fun stuff, you need colorants. Resin by itself doesn't really have a color. It can be clear, white, black, just boring colors. But if you want to make it pop, use your colorants. You can use resin dye, which is the most safe to use. You can use micro powder, which is my favorite. And metal powder as well, alcohol inks. I've heard you can use food coloring, but I don't really recommend it because it's water-based and resin hates water. So you get mixed results from that sometimes, but you can use it, just experiment. That's what I always say. And you need stirring sticks to kind of stir, mix your resin in, because you have to mix the two parts together. And I use popsicle sticks from the craft store, that's the cheapest. And you can also use plastic knives, which is a little bit better. Or anything smooth and flat and non-porous will work. And then you can use, you need plastic cups to dump your resin into. You probably already have these, but I buy them in bulk because I cast a lot. And bathroom cups work, like the little plastic cups size. But I will warn you, don't use the Dixie cups, the kind with the little stripe on it, because they have wax in them, and the wax will hit, they flake off into your casting and ruin it. So just stick with the plastic cups. A kitchen scale is not always necessary depending on the resin you use, but some of the resins don't have a 1-to-1 ratio. For example, there's a resin out there that has a 2-to-1 ratio, so you need 2 parts of catalyst to 1 part resin. So, but a kitchen scale will make your life easier to help you measure if you need to. Paper towels are important to cover up your messes. I use shop towels. They're real cheap at the Walmart, and they're a lot more absorbent than your typical kitchen towel. So it's good to have those on hand. And then also, I would recommend covering your work surface with like an old shower curtain, plastic shower curtain, because you don't want to get resin on your mom's dining room table, because, not speaking from experience, but if you spill resin on the table surface, it's there forever. So, better be safe than sorry. And then also for safety, you want to get nitrile or latex gloves. Nitrile, obviously, if you're allergic to latex, because you don't want to get resin on your hands. I've heard of people developing allergies, like skin allergies to resin. So you just don't want to put yourself at risk. And again, the resin gets hot. You can get burned from resin. So you just have to be really careful about that. So safety. Safety is very important. So at the bare minimum, you should be using, the rubber gloves. Because, again, resin is toxic. It's not meant to go into your lungs or your skin. So nitrile gloves, what I do sometimes, I steal some from my doctor's office. They have you waiting for so long anyway, so. Just take a little bit. They're not going to miss them. Maybe, if you don't get caught. So yeah. Again, you don't want to get the resin on your hands. I know there's some YouTubers that kind of do that, but don't follow their example. Always use some kind of gloves. You can even use kitchen gloves if you have that on hand. And protect your work surface. Again, you can use a little shower curtain, newspapers, shop towels. Those are the blue paper towels. And to cover your work surface, because spills will happen. It's a liquid. You may think you're careful, but spills, accidents happen. So you want to make sure that you protect your work surface. And then you also want to work in a well-ventilated area. Resin has some fumes, especially when it's curing. Again, you don't want to get that into your lungs. To help protect that, you can work in a bathroom with a fan going, have the window open. Just make sure you get some fresh air into the room you're working in so that you don't inhale all those fumes, because they're very toxic. And then use a respirator. That's like next level, but I would recommend just invest into a 3M respirator. That's what I use. Just get on Amazon, it's like $30. With the organically rated cartridges, NIOSH is the keyword there. Just be extra careful. You can never be too careful when working with resin. And then just be smart. Have a plan. If your resin spills, how are you going to clean it up? And you already. And how are you going to transfer things to other things? Just have a plan for how you're going to work with your resin, so that you're not scrambling. Oh, I didn't do this. I don't have this. Have all your materials right there with you, so you can just grab them as you need them. Because resin is, once you mix it together, it starts curing. So you have a time limit to how long your pot life, which is what the time needed is called. Your pot life is a couple minutes to a couple seconds. So you just have to make sure that you know what you're doing and practice. Okay, so getting into an original. What the original is, in this case, it's the object that you want to copy with resin. So this little beetle thing that you see here, that was for my Princess Agatha cosplay. I made that out of clay, and that was the object that I wanted to replicate in resin. It's just boring gray right here, but I replicated it into resin, so this is what I call my original. And the best kind of materials is something that's non-porous, a solid material, so don't try to cast liquid. I don't know why you would do that, but non-porous and solid. Don't use something that's kind of sticky. Make sure it's clean, free of dust and any kind of contaminants. And if you want it, you can cast EVA foam in resin. I've done it before. You just make sure that you seal it with Plastidip or Mod Podge or something to make it so that it won't absorb. Because EVA foam is very porous, so you want to make sure that you seal all those pores up by heat sealing it and putting some Plastidip or some kind of sealant on there. And you can also use a 3D print. 3D printing is the hot new hobby, and 3D prints are. It's good to create original because that plastic can get expensive, but if you use resin, it's a little bit cheaper to do per piece. And you can use clay, you can use foam, Sculpey, Worbla, another resin piece to replicate. You can, sky's the limit. Just make sure that it's not porous and sealed up and clean. All right, so what is a mold? So this is the next step in my building this beetle. I made a mold out of it, out of silicone, and this is the originals on the right side, and I poured the silicone over it, and then made the silicone mold has a cavity in there for the resin to go into. So it's a cavity or a negative that you pour the mixed resin into that'll take that shape. And again, you can make a mold or you can buy a mold. It's really up to you. I like to make my own molds because I usually have like custom shapes I'm doing, but there's one of my go-to molds is a one with a lot of geometric shapes like stars, triangles, they look like jewelry gems. So you can find that on Etsy or eBay or Amazon, a lot of different places. And silicone is the most commonly used mold material because it's very flexible, so you can pop the item out once it's secured. You can use glycerin and then there's also two different kinds of silicones you can use. There's tin pure and then there's platinum pure. Platinum pure is the Ferrari of silicones. It's the most expensive, but it lasts the longest. But you can also use tin pure. It's a little bit cheaper, but you have to be careful. You have to be fastidious about using mold release because, in my experience, your resin can actually stick permanently to tin pure silicone. But use mold release anyway. It's just a good practice to do. And you can also use caulking silicone. I haven't used it myself, but I've seen tutorials of people using caulking silicone because it hardens. But That's the cheapo version of it, but I would stick to silicone if you can afford it. But you know, there's a way to use it on a budget. And then there's two different kind of molds you can do. There's a block mold, which is what you see here. That's a block mold, it's just a one-part mold. And then there's a two-part mold, which is where if you have a block mold is good for something that has a flat bottom on it. So you can, so you really only need like one part of the object. But if you have something like a sphere or something that has an organic shape, you want to look into a two-part mold, which is where you cast one part of the mold first, and then you what's called keying up is to make registration keys to make sure that the two halves line up, and then you make the other part of the mold. And then it becomes a two-part mold. You put it together, make sure you have a hole to pour the resin into, and then you can pour the resin in, wait for it to cure, pop it out, and you have your entire object. All right, here comes the fun part. There's so many effects that you can make with resin. This item here I made for my Rainbow Rogue costume. It's a wand. I used EVA foam to create the original for this, and then I cast it out of resin. And I used holographic powder like for fingernails. That was kind of a trend a couple years back. So it really, I know it's kind of hard to see on the picture, but you move it around, it kind of has that iridescent shine to it. And then, with resin, you can mimic stone, metal, and otherworldly materials that don't exist. You can cast a sword blade, for example, with ground up aluminum powder to make it look like a real sword blade, but it's like half the weight, or even less. And you can mix different things into resin. What I like to use the most is mica powder because it's so sparkly. I love sparkly things. And it's the same stuff that's used in makeup, so it's really cheap to find. You can get a metallic or iridescent effect like the clump you see here. You can either take the powder and brush it into your mold, and before casting, and the resin will kind of pick it up and make it into like the surface of it will have that mica powder, or you can actually mix it into the resin before you mix the two parts together. Oh, yes, you have a question?
Can you use actual makeup like eyeshadow?
The question was, can you use actual makeup? I would be careful, but I experiment with it. I haven't used it myself. I use straight up mica powder, but the reason I'm hesitant to say yes is because makeup has a lot of oils in it. There's a lot of binding agents inside that may mess with the curing, but again, experiment. That's what I would say. But yeah, it is mica powder mostly, so yes. Okay. Other thing you can mix in is resin dye to create a color. And there's two different kinds of dyes. There's an opaque dye, which makes a solid color, and there's transparent dye, which you use with transparent resin to make look like that candy-looking one, looking castings or like a gemstone. And let's see. You can suspend whole objects into resin. One of my projects is, we had the big cicada infestation last year. So I'm a bug nerd. So I saved some of them. And I preserved them in resin. My plan is to preserve them in resin and make some cool jewelry out of it. But yeah, I know it's gross, but you can do that with resin as long as you seal the object beforehand. Pennies, bugs, flowers, LED lights, you can embed, as long as it's, compatible with the resin, you can embed it in there. Even glow-in-the-dark powder. Yeah, suspend objects in the resin. And, after the resin is cured, you can paint it. It readily accepts any kind of paint that you throw at it. And it's Sharpies, acrylic paint, spray paint, any kind of, gold metallic paint. It takes, it's pretty acceptable to any paints. So here's this cool video that I found, of a smooth-on video of how you make a Batman helmet. And I apologize, the music. See how shiny that is? Make out of this. And that's the metallic powder that I was talking about earlier. Brushing the powder into the mold. That mold right there is called a glove mold, where it's like the hollow version that powder in there, so it'll stick to the resin as it's curing. And he flips it inside out. It's like a glove, you know. And then he puts a shell over it to support the shape as he's casting the resin into it. And then smooth cast, they make a black resin, which is really cool. I've used the quartz. You know, it's good if you need something that's black, has a black base to it. And metallic powders, they come out better when you have a black base on them. You measure out how much each party needs. And this is a 1-to-1 ratio, so just mix it up, mix it up. He doesn't fill the whole thing. He just wants a hollow shell out of it. So what he's going to do is he's going to rotate it and make sure it coats all the surface of the silicone. Rotate it around. Makes your arms hurt, but it's worth it. And then he fills it as needed. Brushes it in. Slide against itself. Then you pull it out, and then you got yourself a cool Batman helmet. Then you're ready to take on Superman. Look at that. That's another one. All right. So, how can you use resin with your cosplay? So, it's best to attach resin pieces to your cosplay. What I like to do is, if I have a brooch or a jewelry piece, I will attach a snap to my costume, attach a snap to a piece of fabric, and then glue that fabric onto the resin piece, so that you can take it off when you need to wash the costume. It's just easier to do it that way. And then also, you can embed jump rings into your costume, into your resin, I'm sorry. And what that does is, you have that ring already there, so you can thread a needle through it, thread some thread through it, or attach it to other things. And it's a little bit tricky to do because you have to kind of like hold the ring there as it cures, but that's what I do all the time. And then you can also create small details, like filigree details to put on your fancy armor pieces. You can do that. And you can use a flexible resin so that it kind of curves with the bend in your project. Props and prop pieces like swords, knives, daggers, guns. I've seen people have like resin kits of guns you can do. And then you can make your cosplay shine with glowing resin gems and LEDs. And what you do with that is you can embed, like I showed you before, you can embed LED lights into your resin pieces and then make them shine. And resin is a great diffuser of light, so that's always cool. All right, so I've come to the end of this. I know it's a lot, but I hope you all learned something. I'm just gonna pop up these resources here so you can take a picture of it with your phone. Smooth On is a good resource. Those are the 2 videos that I showed. Vulcan Props is also a good resource. He has a whole blog where he describes his process of making resin, and that's what inspired me when I was starting out. Resin Obsession is a good place to find they have a lot of molds, a lot of resin available, a lot of materials. Punished Props is another good resource for tutorials. Builder runs that. Brick in the Yard Mold Supply is a little less known, but they have a lot of good resin and silicone materials. And then Etsy and eBay for unusual molds and resin. Etsy has a lot of stuff, eBay has a lot of stuff, Amazon. And the Engineer Guide is another place that I bought. They have a lot of good metallic powders, like for casting metallic pieces you can use. And these are my socials. Follow me. I post a lot of my own progress too. I've been kind of slow lately, but I'm starting back up into it. But this is me, so go ahead and take my picture. And yeah, so that concludes my talking head part of this. So does anyone have any questions? Yes.
What do you do about storing to make sure that they're not melting on the time comes around?
Storing? You asked about storing. What I do is I try to keep my resin pieces just locked away in a closet or something, because you don't want to just if nothing else, you don't want it to be exposed to the sun because your pieces can yellow. Even with the best, there's UV additives that you can add to protect it, but you really don't want to risk it. So yeah, just in a dark closet is perfect. Yes.
You mentioned tips on bulbs.
Say again?
You mentioned tips on the bulbs.
Oh yes, I forgot to mention. Okay, all right, bubbles. So the best way that I found is to actually use a blowtorch. If you see the bubbles coming up at the surface, because fire eats up oxygen. That's how it survives. So it'll kind of suck up all that oxygen that's trapped into your resin. So you can also blow on it with a straw. You just have to be really careful about it. And even before you pour it into the mold, just kind of mix slowly. You want to make sure that the swirls are gone, but you want to mix slowly so that you don't whip it, because whipping adds air into it. So yeah, mix slowly.
Like a torch work?
What?
Like a kitchen torch, like a crumbling torch?
Yes, that's perfect. That's perfect. A lighter, you can use a lighter. You can use a kitchen torch. You can use a candle, although I wouldn't recommend it. Just any kind of flame that you can manipulate is good. Yes.
You said there's what's the shelf life of the resin and tablet?
It depends on the resin, but I would say after like 6 months to a year, just toss it. Or what I would do to kind of, you don't want to dump that stuff in the trash, so combine what you have left, and then dispose of the solid version, because that's a lot less dangerous than the liquid versions. But yeah, I would say 6 months to a year, but it just depends on the resin that you have. Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything you use to clean up resin if you spill on a table other than a paper?
So when you spill, as soon as you notice it, wipe it up. You can use alcohol that starts getting sticky, and that helps. Once it's cured, you can't do nothing with it. But yeah, once if you spill the part A or the part B and it hasn't been mixed up yet, use alcohol, use a shop towel, something that's very absorbent, and that usually gets it right up. Just don't leave it, because even the part A, the resin part, can harden on its own. So without the catalyst, so you just want to be careful about that. Yes.
Is there a way to intentionally add air bubbles in a controlled manner?
In a controlled manner, what I would probably do, well, you could whip the resin. If you really want that effect, you can whip the resin. As you're mixing the part A and the part B together. You can put a syringe. Use a syringe to inject bubbles into it. You have to be really careful with it. Do experiments, but yeah, I think that those are the only two ways that I could see. Or even you can use really old resin, because it cures really funny sometimes. Yes?
What are the best ways to add LED lights to a bar?
Adding LED lights, I get the little diodes from Amazon. It's like the light and the two little prongs sticking out. Leave the prongs exposed and then just put the light into the resin. It's best with the 1-part mold. But if you have something that's kind of an organic shape and it's hard to put it in as it's curing, you can also drill a hole into it and then stick the resin or stick the light into there as well. Any more questions? Yes.
Actually, just going off of what you just said about drilling a hole into it, right?
Yeah.
Say if you drill a hole into a piece, would you be able to fill that hole later with resin to cover it up?
Yes, of course. Yeah, because resin, it sticks to itself very easily. So yeah, that's no problem. Yes.
Was the part A and part B that you keep mentioning?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the part A. So resin comes in 2 parts. Most resin comes in part A, which is the resin itself, and then part B, which is the catalyst, which starts the chemical reaction to make it harden into one piece. So you need to mix the two in order for the chemical reaction to start. So it gets hot and then it turns plastic. Yeah. Yes, in the front.
When you have colorants, do you do it after you mix the AMV or before?
It depends. What I like to do is mix it into part B actually, because that tends to be a little less thick than part A. So you can add it in before. If you know that if you're not sure what you're doing, then I would mix it into part B first and make sure you get the color that you want, and then mix it together. But if you're just doing multiple castings, feel free to add it in after you mix the two together. Yes?
So, pretty much, is it normally a one-to-one, or could you, what would be a good ratio for part A, part B?
Read the instructions, because most resin that you get from like Smooth On are 1-to-1, but some are 2-to-1, some are like 36 to 105. Some of them, they get really complicated, which is why I recommend getting a kitchen scale for those complicated formulas. But yeah, it just depends on the resin. But most resin that you get, especially the ones you can get in brick and mortar stores, is going to be 1-to-1. I think there's the casting craft. I don't know if they still make that, but I know that one's like a 2-to-1. So yeah, just read the instructions. Yes. Oh gosh, I can tell you. Oh, let me tell you. I got a story for you. All right, so my newbie self decided to make a whole keyblade out of resin. So, yeah, learn from my mistakes. I bought this lightweight resin, but it's a whole keyblade. So I molded the keyblade. I was real proud of my mold. I poured silicone into it. But it was heavy as crap when I demolded it. It was steaming because there was so much resin. I miscalculated how much resin that I needed. So yeah, my lesson to you from that is just do a lot of research, because newbies like to jump in and experiment. I mean, experimenting is good, but you want to make informed experimentation, if that makes sense. And another mistake I see is touching the resin without using gloves. Do not do that. Be safe. You may think you're being cute, but no, you only have one set of lungs, you only have one skin, so you really want to be safe about it. So yeah, I would say those are do your research. There's a lot of free information out there, and then also just be smart about using your resin. Yes?
Once it's set, it can be held.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah. I would say, resin gets hot as it cures, so I would wait until, sometimes you can see steam coming off of it because it gets so hot. So I would say, read your instructions, make sure that you know how much time needs to pass before the resin is completely cured. Sometimes it takes 24 hours, sometimes it takes like a couple minutes, just depends. But I would wait until it's completely cured, plus a couple of minutes, just to make sure you're safe. In the back?
Is a vacuum chamber necessary? Because I think like some resins, it is like a vacuum or pressure container.
Right. It depends on the resin. Most hobby resins, which is what mostly I use, don't require a vacuum chamber. It's really just a nice to have, because the vacuum chamber, the primary purpose is to get rid of the bubbles. But I would say, yeah, they're pretty cheap at this point. You can get some at Harbor Freight. Just be careful, but yeah, if you want to go professional, then I would say use a vacuum chamber. But for hobby uses, if you're just casting a couple pieces, then it's not necessary. There was one in the front.
Does it get hot enough that it would have issues with PVC piping if you were use that as like your base or something?
It depends on how much resin you're using. If you're using a lot of resin, like that big old keyblade that I use, then yeah, you're going to get some melting. But if it's just a little bit, the less resin you have, the less hot it's going to get. So, yeah.
Do it in layers.
If you do it, you can also do it in layers, yes, as well. All right, there was a question in the back. Yes.
I wanted to ask about if you how it compares to the
Okay, she was asking about UV resin. So UV resin, I'm just starting to get into that, but I like it. I like how you can just use the sun or use a UV lamp to just kind of cure the resin as you go, and it's really quick. And it's useful for coating your items, so you don't have to wait for it, you don't have to worry about drips or anything. So I would say it's a lot more user-friendly because you only have one part. UV resin is one part, and it cures with UV lights, like a nail lamp, or you can put it out in the sun. It just depends on what you want to do. But the only thing, UV resin is a little expensive. But yeah, I'm just starting to get into it, and I like UV resin. So yeah, I would say it's easy. You can just mix. You don't have to measure anything. You just squirt out however much you need. So. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I don't think I'm qualified to like talk about it because I'm still experimenting with it myself. But I like UV resin. It has its own caveats, but I think it's very user friendly for the most part. Is anyone else? Yes.
You mentioned you could do soft resin. How soft is soft? And why would you choose a soft resin over some other material or flexible piece?
Soft resins tend to be less brittle because, if something is flexible, it's not going to crack or break like a hard resin will. So I would say soft resins are useful if you're making like a ring to go on your finger, or I'm trying to think, like a filigree to go on your costume that needs to go on a particularly curvy piece. Then the flexible resin is good for that. Anybody else? Okay, well we can end a little early. You get 20 more minutes back in your day. So, but thank you all for coming. Thank you. And you can reach out to me on social media. I'm always happy to answer questions. And yeah, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Zenkaikon.